Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, October 31st, 2025. Happy Halloween. Apologies for a third upload today. I know that you're probably tired of hearing from me. I promise I'm going to keep this video quite short. We're just talking about the brand new gold standard poll that is out of the state of California. California's Berkeley IGS poll. They do it with the Institute of Governmental Studies. They often do the recall elections, the statewide races. They provide very good context in understanding where California stands at an immediate period of time. They give us an understanding of where Republicans are, Democrats are, independents are, and what they have done is released their final poll, the late October 2025 poll of likely voters about California's Proposition 50. Now, just a quick refresher on what Prop 50 is going to do for the Democratic Party. I'm sure if you've clicked this video, you already know, but if you're new to it, essentially what it does is it authorizes a temporary change. California has an independent redistricting commission that is made up of citizens across the state that put forth congressional maps that, after approval, try to get the interests of Republicans and Democrats and independents aligned to ensure that a fairer congressional map comes out of the process rather than one that is drawn by the state legislature. And so California right now has about 9 seats for the GOP, and about 43 seats for the Democrats, a total number of 52 congressional districts across the country. Recently, in August, Republicans in Texas decided to redraw their congressional map, where Democrats currently have 13 seats. They've essentially reduced the 13 seats from the Democrats down to 8 after the 2026 midterms, taking away 5 seats from the Democratic Party. California, as one of the few states that has the ability to do a mid-decade redraw with the willingness of voters, put forth Proposition 50 that would authorize a change in this map to reduce 5 Republican seats, giving Republicans just 4 seats across the state of California, and Democrats, instead of 43, instead 47. And so Proposition 50 is an initiative here, or rather 48, an initiative across the state that would allow voters to greenlight that process here. And it was something that at initial glance didn't seem like it was going to be super well received across the voting base. The earliest numbers we saw were from Emerson College and Politico, both of which showed quite worrisome signs for the Democrats who wanted to see this map passed. But as they got closer to Election Day, including some of the data from Berkeley, which is releasing this most recent poll, shows that the numbers have only gotten better for the Democratic Party, and in their final survey, their metrics estimate that Proposition 50 could in fact pass by a higher margin than Kamala Harris's in the last presidential election. And that in and of itself is absolutely noteworthy. I think it has been so fascinating to see how voters have really not only changed their minds, but rallied around Proposition 50 as a means of pushing back not only against Republicans in California, but Donald Trump nationwide. This entire thing has become a case study of how Democrats nationalizing an issue in a state that is already beneficial to them only helps them in races like these. If Berkeley is correct and Kamala Harris ends up winning by 20, or she won by 20 in 2024, and the Prop 50 passes by 22, it will show just an immense amount of support in opposition to the GOP as a driving and motivational factor for voters in this off-cycle election. I think the biggest takeaway from the last election was that Democrats need to offer more than just being, and again, whether or not you agree with this, because I think that I certainly grapple with some of these talking points that have been pushed out from the last cycle. But I think what the standard convention has been that being just oppositional to Trump is not enough. But clearly with Proposition 50, and I don't think this means it should be replicated on the national level, but clearly in a safe democratic state, that actually might be a way at really riling up the base, really riling up the voting electorate to turn out for you in an election like this. It's something that I think might be able to be replicated in a state like Virginia, as you find that those voters will have to approve a referendum that will be put forth by the legislature at some point, and so will New York and many other states that are going to be facing very similar sets of circumstances surrounding mid-decade redraws. But I want to get back to this poll for a second and talk just a bit about, how this final metric point really involves itself in how we understand this election. On one hand, we have to understand that Proposition 50 probably was never going to fail. I think earlier on we had some initial hesitancy to believe that it was going to be as strong as the data is suggesting that it is right now. But I think what it really shows is that voters, one, are absolutely paying attention. This thing doesn't pass without any type of substantive education on this matter by voters across the country and across the state. But also, too, what partisanship really is doing. California 15 years ago voted against partisan redraws by, 63 to 33, a massive margin, an overwhelming one, and one where there was a lot of, questioning about whether or not this is something that could ever be done in the future. But 15 years later, under a very different set of circumstances, a different president, a different environment, such different. So many things are different than where it was before. The data really changed, and so did the mindsets of many of these voters. And, thinking about, the Proposition 50 here, again, just an overwhelming 60% were in support of it, but that means that you're winning amongst men 56 to 42. You're winning against women 64 to 34. Young people 76 to 19. Think about it, too. Young voters very rarely even comprise themselves of large portions of the electorate. 76 to 19. Even as a smaller portion, is a really driving factor here. Every age group supports Proposition 50. White voters pass it, Latino voters do, black voters do, Asian voters do. It is very clear here, voters that are in support of it as well. Prop 50 is in a great place for Democrats in the state, and across every single demographic, you will not find it losing amongst any single, demographic group across California at all. And so I think it has been really, really fascinating to see that, so many different voters are out in support of this. You really are going to find that it is difficult for the Republicans to try to spin this in any direction, especially if it does end up passing by a larger margin than Kamala Harris is in the last election, because this really was, the partisan purity test for a lot of voters in California. Are you willing to see a Republican on the presidential? Are you willing to see a Democrat here, even if you weren't necessarily enthusiastic about Kamala Harris? A 20-point delta here is massive. It's not as large as it was for Biden. It was 29 points between him and the president of the United States, but 20 points is massive. And so it meant Republicans were already working at a deficit. It was an uphill climb for sure. It was always going to be very difficult to see how the Republicans even came close to trying to defeat Prop 50, but it certainly seemed like something that there could have been maybe a 10, 20% chance. Today, the most recent betting odds put the chances of Proposition 50 passing at about 5%. Just 5%. Where were they on earlier on when this market first opened? About 80. But that left a 1 in 5 chance that Republicans would be successful in preventing this from happening, but was not the case. I think Proposition 50 will be a lesson to be learned by many Democrats across the country about nationalizing these races, and also just, too, about, voters clearly are angry, and the appetite needs to be satisfied. That is something we talk about constantly, that the Democratic Party is looking for something different with their political party. They're done and tired with the strongly worded letters and the protests to them that might not amount to anything, and the theatrics of Congress. I think they are looking for real and substantive pushback against this administration, and Proposition 50 provides them that as an avenue. It provides them the ability and the agency to redraw these state districts in a way that Republicans are so comfortable doing without the consent of voters. And as much as Democrats are going about it, arguably, a much more principled and democratic way, it achieves the same goal. And that is the way that I think a lot of Democrats who balance that they don't believe that you should just be taking away from voters and the agency that they have, but you should be providing them the opportunity. If this was 2018, Proposition 50, I mark my words, if you go back in time, this would not have been put forth. Even if Donald Trump was acting in the way that he did, I do not believe there was as much of an appetite amongst the Democratic Party base to change the way elections were done, to redraw maps, to push back against Trump so oppositionally after Donald Trump was elected. You can find this in the polling data on the day of his inauguration. The majority of Democrats looked for a 2020 Democratic nominee, even through 2019. You'll find this in the December polling. I was looking at it with Biden just a few days ago. In 2019, 2017 through 2019, voters on the Democratic side looked for a candidate who was willing to work with the other side of the aisle more than they looked for a candidate who was willing to push to the left. On Donald Trump's inauguration, though, the data point I wanted to bring up there is that the majority of Democrats wanted to see the Democrats in Washington try to work with Donald Trump and work alongside him to get good things done if, after all, his election was largely seen as a fluke and that he wasn't prepared. He wasn't able to do what he needed to do and what he wanted to do that he sought out to do. But now voters are angry. Voters don't want a Democratic constituency and do not want Democratic representatives working with Donald Trump. They'll primary them for that. It's a very different national environment. It's a very different Democratic Party base environment, and that has completely changed the way we look at things. And so, yeah, Berkeley, IGS, I do believe is right in predicting that Prop 50 will pass overwhelmingly. The real question is, does this gold standard maintain itself and actually show the final result? The Democrats are likely to win Prop 50 by more than they did in the last presidential election. Is it possible? Certainly. Is it something that we know will happen for certain? Certainly not. It is going to be something that we have to look at and have to take into account, but this is a great sign for the Democratic Party, and certainly one that tells us the Democrats are not even near any chance of a narrow failure or passage of Prop 50, and that it will be an overwhelming yes from constituents and voters across California in the election that's set to take place in just 4 days. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 25 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all